Any other questions?
Give a nice round of applause.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
This is the last presentation between you and lunch. Coming up. I'm going to turn this over to my good friend, Executive Vice President, Senior Vice President of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Bill Kovacs.
Okay, we're going to change both the agenda and the tempo a little bit. As I was going through the presentations last night, I had realized that we had 45 minutes and I had 49 pages of PowerPoints, not just for me, but for everyone. And as I started looking at it, I started saying, wait a second, there's unbelievable information in these, and we can distill it in much more of a conversational spirit. And so the topic's really simple: regulatory challenges from across the agencies. And that's what we want to give you, because it is across the agencies. And in the business community, for example, since 1976, you've had till today, you've had over 200,000 new regulations. That's at a cost of about $1.75 trillion, and to put it in perspective, there's only about $1.2 trillion collected in taxes. And it impacts every business. And so that's why you have the gentleman here. And I'm not going to go through their bios. Some of the bios go on for pages, but they all are extremely skilled and expert in their field. And what I'm going to do is start off by asking each one of them a question, and then we're going to get into more of a dialogue. And as soon as they all finish with their first question, if you have questions out there, bring it in, and if you get slow, then I'll start asking questions. But the goal is to get out the information, and all of the slides that we have will be made available to Harry. You can put them online. The graphics are great. We have four speakers today. Tom Jankowski, he's going to talk about the impact of FCC regulations on the telecommunications industry. He is Director of Global Public Policy for AT&T Services. And there you are. Just raise your hand. And then Kyle Leach is going to talk about the impact of EPA's regulations on the energy industry. He is the Director of Resource Policy and Planning for Georgia Power, which is really part of the Southern company that you're all familiar with. And then on my immediate right is Keith Holman. Keith is going to talk about the impact of the regulations from the small business perspective. Even though Keith is my policy counsel in Washington, he served for years with the Small Business Administration's Office of Advocacy, so he is very familiar with it. And then on my far right is Tom Hassenboehler. I've known Tom forever. He worked on the Hill, but it seems like forever, but he's too young for it to be forever. Tom is now the Vice President for Policy Development and Legislative Affairs for the America's Natural Gas Alliance. Now, with that, I'm going to begin the first question with Tom Jankowski. You know, Tom, we've heard a lot about, quote unquote, the wireless revolution. I think everyone in this room probably has a phone and uses it on a regular basis. But can you talk about two things? One, with the wireless revolution, what's the biggest challenge you're facing? And if you can address that challenge, what does it mean to the business community?
Yeah, thank you, Bill. And before I begin my remarks, I want to thank you for the invitation to be here. And I really appreciate it on behalf of the employees of AT&T. It's good to be here, and I'm glad you're in Atlanta. Thank you. Yeah, it's a wireless revolution, and it's great. I mean, everybody's has a smartphone or two or three, but it's all about what runs on that network, what makes that network run, and it's called spectrum. And spectrum is the radio frequency that allows your smartphone, your PDA, whatever it is, to run. And the reality is we're actually in a shortage of spectrum because the demand for that spectrum is doubling every year, and we are running out of spectrum. So from an industry perspective, and what's impacting us and is impacting our customers, is the growing shortage for wireless spectrum. So we're in the process right now of working not only with the FCC, but with our other telecommunications customers and people who own spectrum who aren't actually in the industry, in the business, to try to free up the spectrum and to have it more efficiently used so that we can highlight the need for faster approval by the FCC, greater business utilization of the spectrum to get it back to our customers so we can provide you with that service. So it's spectrum, spectrum, spectrum.
I don't usually start with a follow-up question for the first speaker, but as long as we're on the spectrum, we've got to get down. What seems to be the impediments right now to getting more spectrum out into the system?
Yeah. One of the impediments is speculation. People have actually purchased spectrum hoping they can cash in at a later point. So they're actually holding spectrum that's actually out there, and they're not putting it to use in providing service. That's one of the big impediments. I mean, a few other impediments would be that previously the Commission hasn't been as quick in approving sales, and we've seen some progress there, though, so the FCC has actually kind of begun to streamline that, so we're encouraged by that. But it's really speculators and those folks that were hoping to cash in, because back 20 years ago, if you had any kind of license for wireless service, you just held on to that and hoped to, kind of let it become valuable, then you would cash in. But that's actually now detrimental to our national policy.
Sure.
Yeah, it's
From the expert.
Sure, it's radio frequency that allows your wireless device to communicate to other wireless devices. So just like on a radio, you would have AM, FM. Spectrum is that broad. Actually, spectrum is broken down into a variety of ranges. You may hear the 700 megahertz band, the 1800 megahertz, whatever. But it's basically the radio waves sliced up into frequencies. Mm-hmm.
It may be technical, but this is an issue that will affect every single one of your businesses, because if you don't have the spectrum, it's going to be kind of hard to use the wireless system, no matter how well-intentioned we all might be. I just wanted to show you, that's FCC. A lot of times we don't talk about the technology and the spectrum, but it does impact your business. Now I'm going to turn to Kyle Leach, and we're going to talk a little bit about energy. And Kyle, as I was looking through your PowerPoint, you started mentioning the impact of new regulations of Clean Air Act, water, solid waste, and you had a number that was really somewhat startling, and you indicated that this was going to result in $4.2 billion of capital costs, and I assume that's just to Southern.
Yes, that's just the Southern company.
Okay, so one utility in the United States, even though Southern is very large, is going to have 4.2. Can you talk about when all of these regulations begin to come out? And there's an estimate that in just the last several years we've had $50 billion of new regulations. What does that do in real terms to the ratepayer? And what does it do to the rate?
Well, and the short answer is it drives up costs. These regulations that are coming down the pipeline, and some of them have already been implemented. The what we call the MATS rule came out earlier this year. It's an air emission rule that requires significant investment on all the utilities that burn coal. Coal is the largest single generation source in our country. Gas is certainly catching up at this point in time because of the low price of natural gas. But all coal-fired generation will have to comply with these rules or retire the plants. And so companies like Southern are making significant investments. NERA, the National Economic Research Associates Group, has estimated that the industry as a whole will be spending $20 billion a year over the foreseeable future in compliance with these rules, the water rules and the solid waste rules. But at the end of the day, what happens and what impacts us and our customers is these costs eventually will find their way into your electricity rates and into your power bills. And it's not just your bills, it's all of your suppliers. If you're renting space from an office space, the landlord's bills will go up, those will be passed on to you. Your suppliers for materials and goods and services, their rates go up, those costs will eventually float to you, the end-use customer. So they all will eventually find their way into your electricity bills.
Next, I'm going to turn to Keith. This is somewhat of an advertisement, and I usually don't like to do them, but in the last few days, the U.S. Chamber has released a small business survey. And Keith, I would really like you to talk about the findings in the survey and what concerns small businesses the most across the country.
Well, first of all, is this on? First of all, let's get a show of hands of how many people in the room would consider yourself to be a small business, associated with a small business. Good, that's about what I was expecting. Yeah, it tends to be overwhelmingly large numbers of people who are involved with small businesses. And typically, you know, we do polls periodically where we would ask, what are the biggest issues, you know, from a regulatory standpoint that are the things that you're worried about? And usually what we always hear are taxes, healthcare costs for my employees, and things like regulations, and particularly filling out paperwork. So the most recent one that was done by the Chamber, which was a Harris poll that was put in the field about a week ago, came back with exactly those issues. Healthcare from the standpoint of the healthcare law and how it's going to be implemented. Taxes as part of what's called the fiscal cliff, which you may be hearing that term being used a lot. It's probably the thing that everybody is fixated on in Washington right now. How do we deal with the fiscal cliff and what's going to happen in January? And then issues with regulations, including, you know, what we just heard, the cost of, what's going to happen to the cost of energy as we have, you know, new environmental regulations that are knocking out coal.
You know, as we, you know, we're talking about regulations and we're talking about cost. And on the panel we have Tom Hassenboehler, and he works for the natural gas industry, and you all know that what's been happening is that we're having a real energy revolution in this country. We have tremendous amounts of natural gas. At least this is what the papers say. And so I guess the question to Tom is, you know, in light of the discovery of, the alleged discovery, you tell us, you're the expert, of all of this quote-unquote natural gas, can you tell us, what does it mean to the United States in terms of, is it real? How much is it? And at the end of the day, if we can get it, what will it do for us as a country?
Sure. Thanks, Bill, and thanks for inviting us to speak today. First off, it is real. It is a huge revolution in the energy industry. Sorry, I'll back that up a little bit. Just 4 or 5 years ago, we were having factories closing, offshoring jobs because of the high prices of natural gas. We were talking about importing gas from the Middle East, building huge new natural gas import terminals in the United States, changing that around. Yeah, let me move that. Maybe that one's a little better there. So we had it really has been a huge shift, and what happened is the companies that I represent, the independent natural gas producers, took that opportunity with these high prices to really revolutionize the natural gas industry and combine the technologies of hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling to unlock a whole new supply of natural gas for this country that really, before 2005, was only thought to be non-accessible. And so what that's done is cause natural gas prices to plummet and cause a lot of your energy prices to go down. And what that has also done is been a huge job creator. We've got new studies that have 600,000 jobs that the shale gas industry is doing now. That's onshore natural gas production, not offshore things. And these are happening. This is happening in areas all around the country. It's not just happening in Texas, Louisiana, and the Gulf South anymore. It's happening in Pennsylvania. It's happening in Colorado, the Rocky Mountains. We've got plenty of new Ohio, Michigan, huge new areas of natural gas discoveries that can really change the local economies and get new opportunities for jobs both in the natural gas sector, but also the added value jobs that you get from all this new supply. I mean, we're talking industrial creators, we're talking new uses of natural gas and power generation to fuel your automobiles. In the chemical sector, we've had announcements from Dow and Nucor about them bringing back plants that were offshoring. So it is real. The short answer, it's been verified by the government agencies. We say about instead of saying we were on a dwindling supply, we now have over 100 years of supply, and as we discover more and as we do more technologies to learn what the resource base truly is, we expect it to continue to grow. So it is a tremendous opportunity for the country, as long as federal regulations don't prohibit the extended use of natural gas.
Well, let me stay with the follow-up question, because, you know, as small businesses, everyone is worried about energy costs and jobs, and having all the gas, especially at the prices today, may not be good for you, but it's good for the consumer. But many times, you know, I hate to say it, that we're the enemy of our own bad policy. And for the last 5 years or so, we've had this war on coal, and now we look over at Kyle, and you're telling us you're going to have to invest $4 billion to try to work things out, and that's going to be rates passed through. But you know, we, the American public, inflicted it on you, and I think we've lost, what, 57, 58 coal-fired power plants across the United States that they've been shutting down. So that's the first part. But what's been happening, and this is going to go to the second part of the question, is there was a war on natural gas, or on coal, and now there's a war, believe it or not, on natural gas. And so 5 years ago, when natural gas was in short supply and they thought we had 25 years left, the environmental community loved it. They thought it was the greatest thing in the world. It was a bridge fuel to put you out of business and move on to something else. Now that we have 100, 125 years. So the question is, I have two things. One is, could you tell us a little bit about how you're, in vague terms or general terms, how you're responding to the war on gas? Because if we get rid of coal and we get rid of gas, and certainly they're trying to get rid of coal or oil too, what do we do? And then talk a little bit about the state of regulation. That fracking has been around for a long time, 50, 60 years. There haven't been any problems. Why all of a sudden is there a problem and they want to move it from the states to the federal government?
Sure, I agree. You know, we are often victims of our own success. We've got, you know, I think it's with, there are certain interests that do not believe in continued low energy costs, whether it be from coal, from gas, from oil. They have a vision of the world that no matter what it is based on renewables. And our position on that is we certainly need all the above energy sources to make the machine that we call America run efficiently and effectively. You know, natural gas we view, and we try to engage with these groups who are against us to say, you know, we can view natural gas as a partner in renewables to help you keep the lights on when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. But the hysteria that's happening is really because of areas of the country where oil and gas production has not occurred. I mean, if you look in Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, all these states where, as Bill said, there's been production happening for decades and over 100 years of oil and gas production. Hydraulic fracturing in and of itself, the technology is not new, has been done effectively and safely for over 60 years. You've got, what you've got is new areas of the country that are just learning about it in the Northeast. New York State is a hotbed right now. It sits on some of the Marcellus Shale. Governor Cuomo is currently evaluating whether or not to open up the state for drilling, and in certain areas where the counties and the local folks actually want it. They want the revenue. They want the dollars. Obviously, they expect the companies engaged in it to be engaged in it safely and responsibly. And you know, we're on a mission to educate as many people as we can to fight the fear and get the facts out there. And that's really the biggest challenge that we have is educating everyone down to the local level.
So you've had a broad overview of what the issues are. We hear about a public policy that can't get enough spectrum out, but we need it for our business. We hear about the cost of regulations, and it's going to be passed through to the business community. Over with Tom, we hear about we have a lot of cheap energy, but now all of a sudden they want to shut that down. And then Keith can talk about all of the uncertainty that the small business is concerned with. I have a few more questions, but before we move to what would be segment 2, does anyone out there have a question? Yes, sir.
Obviously, there are two sides to this. Is there a happy medium where we can keep the cost somewhat controlled without having a negative impact on the industry?
I mean, Yes, there is a, you know, we view state-based regulation as our happy medium. The states have effectively regulated our operations for years. The federal government now is getting pressure from some of these groups to come in and either overdo or overlap what they're doing, or set standards that are different from each state. And the challenge we have with shale gas production is because it's a regional issue. There's no two shale plays that are exactly the same. So you've got different geologic and geographic concerns, different water issues, and we really view the states as the best on the grounds person to manage those challenges. And that's the message that we tend to take to Washington and to our leadership. And we think that's a happy medium. To some folks, though, they only view the federal government as the only answer. So. It currently exists that way on almost all areas of our production, correct.
So happy medium would be moving somewhere in between, maybe?
There's potential, yes, sure. Always potential.
Ma'am?
Yes, my question is to all of the panel for solar energy, which Europe is 40 to 65% of solar power. Do you think that's another alternative with that? And also with the broadband, do you think point-to-point would help you instead of running out of the spectrum that you don't have to put in the rural area? Since, you know, we had the broadband initiative and Connect Divide campaign and what have you, AT&T. Because you own mostly all of the lines in the United States.
I'll let you start
Okay,
so you can
yeah.
on the second part.
We do, in fact, I guess just really to answer your question, there is a way to help deploy greater broadband, and some of that answer is wireless. It is the most efficient and effective, fastest way to build out. The numbers don't help us or our customers to have to run a single line into a rural area, but we can cover a broad rural area. So what we're doing now is we're actually rolling out wireless broadband data broadband. And I think that's what is the answer for, well, cloud is part of it. You can then use the cloud for your small business, but it's what we're calling 4G. It's our long-term evolution technology, and we just think that's the answer. But in order to get that, we have to get the spectrum utilized, and so that's part of the kind of where things are colliding. Because I think people didn't realize we were going to hit a spectrum shortage because we have the same amount of spectrum available that we did back in 2008. And with demand outstripping supply, I mean, we're on a collision course. So I hope I'm answering your question, but the whole idea here is to effectively and quickly deploy that wireless broadband, because if we had to build out facilities the old traditional way, it would just take years. So I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
Regarding your question on solar, certainly solar, wind, all renewables have a part to play in our energy mix. We need to diversify our portfolio so we're not over-reliant on any particular fuel source. In Europe, they have invested heavily in solar and wind, but still it constitutes a vast minority of their generation resources. And their costs are significantly higher than ours here in the United States. Their energy costs are.
They're not at 45% either, are they?
No, sir. I would say they're probably down in the single-digit range, maybe 6 to 10%, even if that much. Solar continues to be a higher cost resource. We can install natural gas combined cycle generation technology at a fraction of that cost it would take to do an equivalent amount of solar. So yes, we do need to factor those technologies in. It is a free fuel, absolutely, but it is intermittent. It doesn't, when the sun's not shining, you're not generating electricity. On a very cloudy day, you're not getting the full output. So you need backup generation, coal-based, nuclear, or natural gas to supplement it.
Tennessee Valley is the only utility company that give you tax credit or give you credit back on your bill if you switch over to solar versus with your generator attached to your home as well.
Well, there are a number, right here in Georgia, if you install solar panels at your house, you can sell back to Georgia Power Company, and we will pay you an energy rate for that solar production. So a lot of utilities will do that, but the cost still continues to be higher than conventional resources. It is coming down, and the costs have come down dramatically, and as we can get them to be more affordable and more reliable, we'll incorporate that more into our fleet.
Before I turn to you. Do either of you want to comment? Okay, Larry?
You know, in Illinois, we've been having a lot of conversation on coal gasification. I'm kind of curious to find out what you guys are thinking in terms of, you know, is that, we shut it down politically, but I'm just curious to find out what you guys think about that as a, you know, since there's so much abundance of coal in Illinois, does coal gasification make sense, and if it does, why? If it doesn't, why not?
Well,
Kyle, you may be the best.
Southern Company is actually building a coal gasification plant in Mississippi. It's Kemper County, Mississippi. And it uses a proprietary technology to take coal, convert it into syngas, and then we'll capture about 60% of the CO2 that comes out of the, about 40% of the CO2 that comes out of the plant. That CO2 will be piped down into the Gulf area and will be used to pump underground for enhanced oil recovery, somewhat similar to fracking, but instead of using liquids, it uses the CO2. Yes, it is a viable technology. We think commercially, it will be available in Mississippi in the next couple of years. We expect to go online in the next 2 years. And to your point, I mean, we've got incredible reserves of coal. We've got these great reserves of shale gas. We need to be taking advantage of those as a country and learn how to burn them cleanly and efficiently for our customers.
We're going to get to everyone, yes. I've got one back there, but I would just want to respond a little bit, just follow up, Larry, on yours. One of the other issues that the entire of the coal states face is it's not only that you have a war on coal so that you can't use it. The new war is so that you can't export it. So if you look at all the ports that are in the West, they're all being challenged to try to shut them down. And that's going to have ripple effects throughout a lot of industries, including the railroads, which aren't on this panel. But I throw that out because these are all jobs, and when these jobs are lost in these communities, many of the people who lose the jobs don't get new ones, or if they do, they get ones that aren't as...
So that port that Peabody wants to put outside of Seattle to ship all the coal they can to China, they're trying to block that.
That's correct. They're trying to block 3 of them. There's 2 of them on the Columbia, one on that's the Longview port. There are 2 others on the Columbia. They're trying to shut down all 3, plus they're trying to shut down all the rail spurs that would take the coal to the ports. These are the battles that are going on. It's our policy. I don't want to preach, but it's our policies that are affecting jobs. We don't have jobs because our policies will not let us create them. Anyway, sorry.
Shut coal down, period.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Very specific suggestion. One, I'm from Mississippi, and 2 of the gentlemen have alluded to coal and fracturing and so forth, the Kemper gasification. And in my home area in southwest Mississippi, there's been discovered a 7 billion barrel part of Tuscaloosa marine shale. And my specific interest is, I think we're getting a little off point because I don't hear any contractual or opportunity conversation about how minority businesses participate in these billion-dollar developments, both specific in the industry, which is very capital-rich, very technological intensive, which may exclude some of us. But there are enormous supply and ancillary businesses, which would probably be small businesses, both on the contractual side and those stimulated by it. So I think there needs to be a more specific conversation around concrete business opportunities and or initiatives that can be developed to increase the participation of minorities. And I think if we miss discussing that, we've missed the point of the collaboration.
Well, we live that. As president of the National Black Chamber of Commerce, we have many members who do many millions of dollars of business in the oil, the gas, the shale industry. I've got a construction company building every home they can build in Montana for the oil boom out there, doing housing by towns, doing about $300 million worth. We've got them, and they're out there. We got some fine engineers down in Houston and Louisiana making a ton of money, but also on that shale, people who own land. I've got a cousin who gets $40,000 a month just from the acres that she inherited from her grandfather.
Well, I'm simply suggesting
I'm telling you, there's money out there. I get your point.
I'm simply
But
suggesting
I'm telling you, we're in it.
I'm simply suggesting that's kind of specificity needs to be communicated to us.
Well, we can read the newspapers, we can do that, but it's out there. For those looking for it, it's out there.
Because we're here for the opportunities, and that's not being communicated.
Send me an email and I'll show you the opportunity, sir, personally.
I saw two hands over here somewhere. Okay, sir.
Yeah, I was gonna ask a question. The question is simply this. When you started off, you kind of alluded to the fact that there are regulations that are preventing all these different industries from doing what they ought to do. My concern is that as a small business person, yeah, we want industry to grow, but there ought to be a balance between what is happening in the environment and how industry grows. Secondly, I'm a CPA, and you're saying that it's going to cost billions of dollars. But are we supposed to pay something for living longer? Or what's the question? How do we intertwine this so that it becomes beneficial to us as small business people, and at the same time, we are able to do the things to move along the continuum of growing the business? Because I'm hearing all this money that it is going to cost, but we are not hearing what it is going to do, basically, to the human person. If you look at North Indiana at one stage, you couldn't drive through there without that smog. Now we can drive through there and we are living longer. So I want the chamber to address, basically, how do we blend the changes and the regulations so that we are not over-regulated, but at the same time, we breathe the same atmosphere, whether we are poor or we are rich. And I don't want to die just because we need to make some more money.
Okay. That's a very good question. We struggle with that question all the time, and let me see if I can sort of rephrase the question. There is no one in any chamber in the United States that's for pollution or for doing anything that is harmful, and if someone is violating the environmental laws, they ought to just be thrown in jail. That's just goes without saying. But as people attack industry for polluting, I think what you have to appreciate is if you went back just a little over a century, the lifespan of the American citizen was about 48 years. And today,